Oh man, today we're going to be asking that ultimate question. Should I ever carry a gun or a weapon of any kind on the bike? I don't think you're ready for this one. Today I'm creating this video all about security both on and off the bike while traveling. Now, I'm not making a differentiation between international travel and domestic travel here in the States because I think that for the most part, a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about today apply to both international travel and domestic travel. The one point where this might be a slightly different is when it comes to the weapons that you're choosing to use on or off of the bike or traveling with, and whether or not you have a gun and all of those separate issues, which we will get into later in this video. So stick tight with me. Now, there's a lot of people that are out there that talk about this place is more dangerous than that place, or all the horror stories you've heard of international travel or places in the United States that are impossibly difficult to travel through or possibly even lethal to travel through. So I'm going to dispel a lot of that right now and saying that on the ground intel for most of these places will tell you that the things that I'm going to go through will not only increase but pretty much keep you as safe as you possibly can be in any of these environments, regardless of how dangerous they might be on the news or in State Department reports or things along those lines. So take all of that sort of with a grain of salt. All the horror stories that you hear, all the most dangerous places in the world, relax on that side of it just a little bit and understand that just following some fairly simple rules and understanding a little bit about your environment can go great lengths to providing you a secure environment and making sure that you're safe no matter where you're traveling. Now, before anyone starts saying, I don't know what I'm talking about, let me get you a little bit of my resume. I started with 8 years in the Marine Corps in a small unit tactical division where I had deployments across 4 different countries and saw a ton in that capacity. Once I left there, I joined an executive security firm where we dealt with high-risk clients and folks that really needed close protection and the folks that can mitigate risk as best as possible in a variety of different environments. My job is to make sure that my client and my team can go into an area and out of an area safely and with as little of a footprint as possible in that arena. It's the type of thing that feeds over into travel for motorcyclists or adventurers in general very, very well. So if you can pay attention to the things I'm going to talk to you about today, you can find that you can bring risk down significantly, even in some of the most hostile of areas. I know that what I'm going to talk about today may have the tendency to piss off people on either side of this equation, but before you go off and you decide that you are compelled to comment, make sure you see the entire video so you don't necessarily sound foolish about something I talk about later in the video that you didn't get to see, where maybe I support your side a little bit more. Make sure you check out the entire thing because I will be talking about all different sides of this issue. Everything I'll be talking about today has come through training, knowledge, and experience that I have received over many years in this area. So you can take it for what it's worth, but please understand that no matter what I'm talking about, no matter what you've heard anywhere else or even what your own thoughts are, you solely are responsible for your own well-being while you're out traveling. You are responsible for your security. You are the one that's going to be taking care of yourself and make sure that the welfare of you, your team, your partners, the people that are around you and your family, it's up to you and you alone. Often in our world, it's really easy to start thinking about things in a very binary sense. But for today, and specifically for this lesson, I'd really like you to think about the world in terms of sliders. On the one side, you have vigilance, discipline, heightened stress. And on the other, you have relaxation and enjoyment and lower stress levels. And we all need to place ourselves somewhere on this stratum, depending on our environment and our comfort level. Today we're going to be talking about exactly where you put that slider and how important it is to know what those different levels are that lead you to more safety versus more enjoyment, and when it's important to call on those different sides. For instance, when you're in your home, you should be more so over in this category, more relaxed, more stress-free, more calm, less vigilant, because you probably have a fairly secure border around you, whether that's a fence line, whether that's a locked door, whether it's a good neighborhood. Over here should be a pretty relaxed area. Getting over here, you've got some more dangerous areas, places where you need to keep your head on a swivel a little bit, need to be more vigilant, probably less relaxed, a little bit more heightened and ready to go. There's a Cooper's code, a color code that we'll go through a little bit later in this video that describes a little bit of this spectrum as well. But just understand, it's not here or here, it's anywhere along this entire spectrum that you can operate, and you need to understand how that works. To start off with Cooper's color code, if you've ever seen Dan the Fireman here on YouTube, he deals with this a lot when it comes to the way that we ride and how to utilize this in riding styles. It also works just the same for personal security off the bike and while traveling. So we'll deal with it really quickly here. The colors you deal with are white, yellow, orange, red, and black. Now, all of these are varying different levels of your discipline side versus your relaxation side. And how you move through those will be very, very important with how you deal with threats and any sort of issues that you find around you. When it comes to these different colors, they each mean a little bit something different. So when you're in white, this is when you're at home, you are unaware, nothing's really going on. Perhaps you're even sleeping or relaxed, watching TV. These are situations where if something were to spring upon you, you would be completely taken aback. You would have no idea what was about to happen. You have no presence, no awareness. You're completely turned off. Your brain is shut down. That is white. Now, this is obviously not the type of situation where you'd want to do a lot of traveling in white. That's not a place to be. When you get to yellow, you've heightened your awareness. As soon as you step out your front door, generally we're going to start being in yellow. This just means that your head's kind of moving around, you're scanning, you're looking at things, you're paying attention to your surroundings in much more way than you would at home where we're just sort of on autopilot. When you get to orange, orange is recognition that you've seen a threat out there. Now, when Dan the Fireman talks about this, he talks about entering orange anytime you come to an intersection. As soon as you see an intersection coming up, you're gonna wanna be in orange because that's when you need to be aware of threats coming. This is, orange is a great place for your head on a swivel or heightened awareness. That's orange. As soon as you get to red, now you're in it. This means that you recognize that something's coming. Often people will talk about red as being in the fight. This means that moment has come and you need to be ready to react. That means emergency braking if you're on the bike. That means that you recognize that a kidnapping is trying to take place or somebody has pulled a knife on you. You are now in the fight when you get to red. Black is generally where you'll end up if you are not prepared for this type of stuff. If you were in white and somebody jumps out at you, you have sprung immediate to black, which means your brain is off again. You've gone full panic mode. There's nothing you're going to be able to do. You are not going to survive that circumstance, right? So ideally, you want to graduate up in these. You want to get to yellow to orange, recognize that threat long enough and early enough that you can move into red instead of black. One of the first things I want to talk about when it comes to security while you're traveling on the bike, off the bike, is going to be drinking. Now, obviously on the bike, you never want to be drinking. There's no circumstance where drinking on the bike is going to make sense. It's automatically going to put you in a bad spot. It's illegal in most places, so just don't do it. However, when you're traveling and you are off the bike, and sometimes you might be in a little bit more rugged or difficult or adventure type areas or even some dangerous areas, drinking is going to raise your level of difficulty significantly. Okay, we talked about the spectrum that we're going to be on. We talked about the sliders that you're going to be on. As you move drinking on there, no matter how disciplined, regimented, aware you are, drinking is going to move that slider further and further to the relaxed, incapable, and unaware side. It makes you more and more of a target, and it makes you an easier target the more you drink. This is why we have to be really cognizant of when and where you're choosing to do that. If it's the sort of place where you have a lot of friends around you, if you have a comfortable environment, if you have a secure environment, absolutely, let loose, go a little bit crazy. But if you're solo, if you have one partner and that partner is also getting a little bit drunk, you may want to dial back that drinking a little bit so that you can maintain that awareness and your ability to deal with any of those threats that might come your way, especially if you are in yellow, orange, or moving into red. Drinking is going to be a major problem. For instance, on my trip down through Honduras, we traveled through a lot of places in Mexico that weren't necessarily dangerous, but definitely things that we needed to be aware and know what we were doing as we were traveling through different cities, as we didn't know the language, as we were staying out a little bit later at night. We needed to make sure that we were aware of everything that was going on around us. But once we got to the resort, once we docked the bikes, once we checked off, once we got into the resort, we drank like crazy, had a really good time. But as soon as that stopped and we were back out on the road, and again, in unfamiliar environments with fewer people and just didn't really know exactly what was going on, that drinking stopped. It was cut down dramatically. Sometimes we did at the tail end of the evening when we were in the hotel room, but normally off limits because of the fact that we wanted to maintain that awareness level. Another element that's going to be wildly important while you're traveling is paying attention to your instincts. Now, because our world has become so safe and civilized, it's generally something that we've learned to tamp these down. We've learned to not pay attention to them because it's not vitally necessary in our day-to-day life. When you're traveling, though, pay attention to your instincts. Learn to cultivate these upper sensory capabilities that you have. If you have the feeling that a town or a person or a hotel or a restaurant or a street isn't someplace that you should be, then don't be in that place. Don't be by that person. These are things that are really hard to quantify, but you will pick it up. You will pick up a feeling, an urge, a notion that something about that place just doesn't feel right. And you might not be able to put your finger on exactly what that is. You might not be able to say exactly what that reason is that you have that feeling, but you do need to pay attention to those feelings. And ultimately, if you pay attention to that feeling and you're wrong, you don't really miss out on anything. But if you don't pay attention to that feeling and you're wrong, it could be disastrous. If you skip through a town because it just doesn't feel right, nobody's worse off. You'll stop at the next town, you'll get dinner there, you'll get your hotel room there. If you don't talk to this guy because he just doesn't feel right, but you talk to that next person that you seem more likely to trust, nobody's worse off. But you will find that if you learn to hone these skills in an environment that's safer, if you do this around your own town, around places that you're more comfortable with, and just kind of start paying attention to the feelings you get about people as you run into them or as you pass by them or talk to them in stores or if you ask for directions, you'll get a sense of how good your instincts are and where that point where you really need to start paying attention lies. And once you do that, you'll be miles ahead of a lot of people out there who don't pay attention to these things at all. Just listen to those instincts and at least be reminded each time they chime off that something here doesn't feel right. Now, why is that? And step forward from there. Another way to stay safe while you're traveling, stay off your phone. Know where you're going. Before you leave the hotel, before you separate from the bike, anywhere you go, make sure you know the pathway that you're going to be taking. You're not going to be taking side streets. You're not going to be just guessing while you're out there. Know the direction that you're traveling. If you do need to stop in some place that's well lit, that's crowded, a store, a restaurant, something along those lines. Get your bearings and then get back out on the road. The worst thing you want to be doing is face down in your phone, looking lost, not having any idea where you're going. Even if you ask for directions, you are better off than face down and distracted in your phone. You do not want to be face down at any time while you're on the street. Keep that head up, keep those eyes moving around, and make sure that you at least appear to know where you're going. Confidence will have a lot to do with whether or not you are a susceptible target, a possible target. Make sure that you're always moving in a direction with purpose. This takes us right into our next one, which is moving with purpose, which is not loitering, not just hanging around, not being in one spot for too long to do nothing. Obviously, when you're around your house, it's okay to just lounge and be relaxed and in a lot of different neighborhoods that you can walk in. And again, this all comes down to that spectrum that you're going to be on. If you are in a place that you're completely comfortable in, you've got a lot of people around you, you feel confident in what you know and what the threat level might be in that place, relax, hang loose, have a good time. But if you recognize that you are in that orange category or even that upper yellow category and you're kind of feeling those instincts going on, make sure that you are moving with confidence and with a purpose. There is no point at which having your head down and looking scared or nervous is going to be a benefit for you. You always want to move confidently as though you have a purpose where you're going and know exactly what's about to happen. Again, that's not always going to be the case for you. So if you need to recollect yourself and put yourself in that position again, stop somewhere where there are a lot of people, where it's well lit, to a crowded place, and then move out from there back into that very purposeful stance. All right, so far we've gone through a lot of the really easy stuff, kind of high level thought process, mindset type of things. Now I'm gonna start getting into some of the practical things, the training that I've had to be able to recognize the threat that's out there and combat it or mitigate it as best as possible. The first thing that you're going to want to do is keep an eye on people's eyes and on their hands. Any threat that you're going to be met with is going to be dealt with the hands. It's going to be an edged weapon. It's going to be a blunt weapon. It's going to be a gun. It's going to be a fist. Something with their hands will tell you what their interactions with you are going to be. If you see somebody who's got a hand tucked in somewhere or jammed into their pockets or just generally looking like something is threatening to you, that's somebody you're going to want to pay attention to. And even if they're 20, 40 feet off, as soon as you can see that that person is a threat and 15 other people next to you have empty hands and they're talking with their hands, or they've got a magazine, something that's not going to be necessarily detrimental to you, you can focus in on that one threat and see if that person is any further threat to you. And this all comes into that color gradient again. You can dismiss people as white or yellow as they pass by you. Like, these are not threats, they're not a big deal. That guy might be an orange. And then once you see that he is a threat, bang, it's red and it's go time. And you know that. And the hands will tell you a lot about that. The second thing that you need to pay attention to is their eyes. Eyes will tell you a lot about what a person's intent is as well. And if you have your head up and you're meeting eyes with all of these people, the thing that you're going to be looking for is there's 3 types of people out there. There are sheep, there are wolves, and there are sheepdogs. Now, sheep, they go about their day in white. They don't know anything that's going on. They don't care about anything else that's going on. They're completely relaxed, and they're just going about their business. No problems. Now, a wolf, he will have his eyes looking around. He will be looking for targets. He'll be looking for threats. He'll be seeing how his world is interacting and trying to find the person that isn't paying attention, the person that he can go after. As a sheepdog, when you meet that wolf's eyes, you'll recognize it. He'll be looking the same way that you're looking. He'll be looking for different threats. He'll be looking for people out there. And when you see each other, you'll recognize each other. As soon as you see somebody who's looking out amongst their world the same way that you are, you need to determine if that's a sheepdog or if that's a wolf. If it's a wolf, you should at bare minimum be an orange at that point, possibly red. It's possible, but that's something that they'll just give a tip of the hat, recognize that you're paying attention to them, and disappear. More often than not, that's what will happen. If they don't get the jump on you, they'll be gone. But if you do meet their eyes and you recognize that that's a threat, it's go time, but at least you're prepared. At least you're going from orange to red instead of white to red. And that's vitally important if you want to stay safe in this category. It breaks down as easy as this. You check everybody's eyes, you look at people, you can give them a hi, a nod, a hello. It's actually really great because it makes you wildly friendly, because you do have to interact with each one of these people, even if it's as quick as a gaze. You see eyes, you meet eyes, and you see what their intent is at that point. It's a great way to go through the world in general, but it's also a really safe way to go through the world, because you can pick out those with malintent really quickly and immediately know whether or not you're going to have an engagement on your hands. Once that engagement happens, you should already know what's in their hands, whether they're in their pockets, whether they're holding something under their jacket, whether they've got a club, a knife, something along those lines. You already know what your engagement is going to look like, and at that point, you're ready to go. Another thing that's going to help keep you safe out there is being very choosy about the paths that you're taking. Obviously, we've all talked about this before. We all know this stuff from way back in high school and grade school when we were first taught how to be safe out on the streets on our own. You're going to want to choose busy, well-lit, crowded areas as opposed to sparse, dark, tight areas. The more broad open that space is, the easier it is to identify issues that are coming at you, as opposed to tight, cramped areas where you might be a little bit stuck up and not have as much ability to react. So recognize that when given a choice between the long way round that might be well lit and crowded and obvious to go through versus a shortcut that is dark and tight, take the time. Go out there, explore a little bit more, but take the long, well lit way home as opposed to the shortcut that's dark. This is just a simple thing of recognizing where your instincts are and recognizing where your comfort level is. And as you move into those darker, tighter areas, if that's perhaps the only place that you can go, recognize that you need to be more aware of every corner, every shadow, every person that's in that environment, because you have now raised your level of difficulty, of danger, just a little bit. Up next, I'm going to talk a little bit about reactionary gaps. Now, reactionary gaps are the minimum distance needed to react to any sort of incoming threat. And that's going to vary depending on what the person is holding or has or their intent for you. When it comes to guns, for instance, guns are a line of sight reactionary gap. So if they can see you without cover, they can hit you from that point. They can get to you from that point. When it comes to edge weapons, we look at anywhere from 20 to 25 feet as being that reactionary gap. In that amount of time, as soon as they get within that 25 feet, they can get on top of me in about the same time it takes for me to actually react to that threat. Impact weapons tend to be about maybe 10 to 15 feet plus whatever the length of that item is. If they've got an 8-foot staff, obviously they're going to be able to close that distance and get to you a lot faster than that, just 10 or 15 feet. But ultimately, once they get inside that amount, if it's a blunt weapon, an impact weapon, a bat, a staff, pipes, that's when you know you really need to start paying attention to that person, because they are close enough that you won't be able to react once they're there. With empty hands, we say about maybe 5 to 6 feet. So once person was in 5 to 6 feet of you, they can get to you before you can necessarily react to whatever that hand is. So you better determine prior to them closing these reactionary gaps whether or not that person is a threat, because if they are inside that area and you haven't determined whether it's a threat, they'll be on top of you before you know it. This next point is the very best way to stay safe in almost any environment that you're in. It is something I utilize all the time, unless I'm at my own home or going to a relative's home or just don't have an option. If it's there, I always use this, but it's a simple buddy system. Always travel in pairs. If you have any worries at all, if you are in anything other than white, you should always be traveling in pairs. This makes it really easy for you to watch their back and them to watch yours. It also makes it very difficult for any singular person to come after you as a threat, because you now have 2 on 1. And if they're gonna bring 2, you also complicate the situation significantly for them, because there's now 2 of you, which ups all of the different odds that they have to deal with, right? So again, you don't necessarily have to be Loctite and perfect with your security. You just have to be better than their next best victim. So it sounds really crass to say, but anytime you can harden up your skills and harden up your target a little bit, that makes that next person a more vulnerable target and an easier mark than you are, and thus keeping you safe. If you have an opportunity to always travel in pairs, always double up, do it. It's going to keep your safety level super, super high, because you make yourself a hardened target. It's much more difficult to attack 2 and to get the jump on 2 than it is 1, especially if both of those have their eyes up, have their heads up, they're paying attention to their instincts, and they're looking out for each other. Some of the spots that people have talked about that can be kind of danger areas, especially when you're talking about traveling in 2s. Simple things that are tight, confined spaces where people can get the drop on you before you have an opportunity really to react. Bathroom stalls is a great one. Elevators can be another. And just to help you out a little bit in dealing with control and creating distance. Ultimately, creating distance and giving yourself a little bit of time is paramount to keeping you safe. When it comes to elevators, this is a great one because it's a sort of counterintuitive. A lot of people, when they get on an elevator, they like to stay really close to the buttons because they feel like that's got some measure of control to it. But it doesn't. Once those doors close, those buttons are meaningless. It doesn't do anything for you. So ultimately, your safer move, and as long as you think about this, your safer move is to hit that button and to move away, as far away from those buttons as you can. The reason why is because anybody who's coming onto that elevator for regular reasons, they're gonna come in and they're gonna go to the buttons. If they come in and towards you, you now have your split-second opportunity to go, okay, I'm moving from orange into red. And that could be all it takes to keep you safe. If you're at the buttons, they can be on top of you before you even realize that what they're going for isn't the buttons themselves. So it just takes a little bit of thought. You just have to think about these things, about where can I create distance and a little bit of time for myself to give myself that security blanket that I need. Bathroom stalls are the same thing. If you come in and you button hook right to that first stall, you're putting yourself in a much more vulnerable position than if you go all the way to the last stall. The last stall is going to give you an opportunity to hear a couple more steps before somebody gets to you. And that can be all it takes to prepare yourself and get your body ready for whatever that next move is going to have to be. Ultimately, this all comes down to you just having to think about your situation. Think about where you're at. Think about how you can create that opportunity to think and to have a moment to prepare yourself if a threat is coming to you. Another one of my favorite things to do while you're out there and trying to avoid any sort of difficult areas or problem areas is talk to people. If you're at a hotel, talk to your concierge, talk to the cab driver, talk to people that you're getting food from, people that are already in your circle of trust, so to speak. Once you're dining at a restaurant, ask that person where the best hotel is that's up the street, or ask them where you would go to buy certain items for your food, or what path you would take, or if there's a bar you specifically want to go to. Talk to them about it because they're already talking to you. They're already involved with you, so they're likely to give you a good answer. The last thing you want to do is just guess at this type of stuff because you could put yourself in a situation where you walk down the wrong street. And ultimately, when you talk to the locals, they know the bad streets. They know the bad areas. They'll tell you that. They'll say, hey, go this way, but avoid this street. This street's not where you want to be. And that's life-saving information for you. That can be the difference between you getting mugged and not. That can be the difference between you getting knocked out and not. It's the perfect place to get that on the ground, local intel that you need, is just talk to people. Plus, it enriches your experience by having a little bit of local flavor each time. They'll tell you about restaurants you wouldn't find otherwise. They'll tell you about sites that you wouldn't otherwise see. So make sure that you're talking to people, and that will put you steps ahead of where you would be if you were just out there guessing. All of this really comes down to pattern recognition. When you're out on the street, you'll pass hundreds, thousands of people every day that all look the same, kind of feel the same. They're paying attention to their own thing. They're doing whatever it is that they're doing during their daily visits. But it's the one that sticks out. It's the pattern anomaly that you really want to pay attention to. It's the guy that's wearing stuff that doesn't quite fit in with everybody else. It's the guy who seems a little nervous, who's walking in a different direction. And this works for towns also. If you roll into a town that seems different than the past 5 that you've been into, and everybody's a little skittish, or the roads are cleared out in places that they wouldn't be normally at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on that day, that should be a good indicator that something's not right there. Pay attention to those patterns. Anything you see that's a little bit off in your pattern, anything that's a little bit unusual in that pattern, pay attention to that item and see if that amounts to something that's a threat. That amounts to something that's gonna put your security at risk. And if it is, find a different place to be. Always find a way out of those situations first rather than getting into that engagement. Now, I know there's a lot of naysayers out there. There's people that'll say that there's no reason to be this uptight or this crazy or this disciplined or this aware because the threat isn't out there. And I would agree with you for the most part, but I would liken this a lot to defensive riding. That defensive riding doesn't necessarily mean you're enjoying the ride any less. It just means you're aware of those threats. And when that time comes where you need to be paying a little bit more attention, you heighten that awareness. You heighten that opportunity. You really focus in and pay attention to the things that could end your ride extraordinarily quickly. It's the same thing I would say about my emergency beacon. I have my emergency beacon with me because on the off chance that something awful happens. And it's the same thing with this, that I'm not necessarily calling this stuff to me. I'm not necessarily putting out negative vibes into the ether, but I am going to be aware that sometimes bad stuff happens and I want to be ready for it as quickly as possible and with as much preparation that I can do beforehand to mitigate my loss in that circumstance. All right, as you've noticed so far, we have not talked about any weapons, we've not talked about any aggression, anything that you would be necessarily a violent person for doing at this point. It would all be defensive and awareness and so on. Now we're gonna get a little bit into I think the nitty gritty of what this argument really becomes for a lot of people, which is the gun question, the weapons question. First, before we get into any of this, let me say, always operate within the bounds of the law. Whatever those laws are, whatever state laws, whatever country laws those are, whatever border laws you're going to be dealing with, always operate within the bounds of those laws. And there's 2 reasons for this. One is for your own well-being. If you are an American trying to get weapons down into Mexico, you're going to jail. If they find them on you, you're going to jail. It's happened to Marines that have just happened to have a hunting rifle in the back of their truck. So it doesn't even need to be intentional. You are going to jail and it's going to be a huge issue for you. Do not do it. The second reason, and I would argue maybe even more important, is because you'll ruin it for everybody else. If you are that one fool that's going to be rolling into places that are gun-free zones or states that don't allow you to carry, and you're going to be carrying, you're going to clamp down laws harder on every one of the rest of us. If you're going to be that guy that's going across the border with a gun, that means that the next guy that goes through that's got a cooking knife on him, everybody's going to be looking at him a little bit different, a little bit closer. So don't do it for all of those reasons. Now that that's out of the way, let me get a little bit into the reasons why I personally carry every place that I can and generally have a weapon of some type on me always. My philosophy has always been that I carry the weapon on me wherever I can, and I would carry it a lot more if the laws were relaxed. I am a law-abiding citizen. I'm going to continue to be so I am not carrying in places that I'm not allowed to, but I would appreciate it if I was allowed to carry in far more places. The reason why is because to me, it always seems like the type of item that I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And I know that sounds really reductionist and kind of dismissive to the opposite side, but I've had a gun on me for years and years, and never had a problem with it. I will never have a problem with it as long as I take care of it properly. But when that time comes where the rubber meets the road and I actually have a situation where it's called on, I will have it on my hip. Now, for all you Second Amendment guys that are cheering and going hooping and hollering about what I just said and thinking that I'm on your side, I am, to a degree. But if you're carrying a weapon, or if you want to carry a weapon and you're not also carrying one of these, a trauma kit, or one of these, a trauma kit, you're wrong. Because you are far more likely to save a life with one of these than you ever will with a gun on your hip. When it comes down to saving lives, having medical training and having the medical supplies necessary to help somebody that's had a traumatic circumstance is just the obvious solution. If you want to be the hero, if you want to be the guy that saves the day, if that gun on your hip is for protection and to make sure that everybody's safe, this is a better option for you right now. And if you're carrying a gun and you're looking to put holes in people and you don't have a way to fix holes in people, you're wrong. You're doing it wrong. Put the gun away, get a trauma kit, get training, and until you are carrying one of these every day, that gun should not be attached to you ever again. If you're interested at all in finding out what I have in my trauma kit, I have two of them. I have an ankle and I have basically like a hip holster type of one. If you want to know what's in these kits, leave a comment down below. I'll get you all the input, everything that you need, probably a little bit of a discount as well if you want to get this exact trauma kit. It's what I've carried for years. I love them to death. They're super easy. I've used a lot of the supplies in here. I've got some stuff in here that's just for me, some that I can use on partners or strangers if I need to. But it's a must-have item if you're going to be traveling in an area where you think that there might be danger of any sort, or you might run across somebody that needs some help and you're the one person there that could provide it. If you do choose to carry while you're traveling, one of the most important things that you're going to have to go through is how do you carry this weapon? Because there's a couple of things that are going to be really important. One, do you have the capability of getting to that weapon when you need it? Whether that's in a chest holster, whether that's on a hip, whether it's on the bike. But the other thing that you need to consider also is that if you are ever separated from that bike, if you go down in a street accident and that gun is not attached to your body, but instead the bike, you are now separated from that weapon and it becomes a whole separate issue. Now, instead of having to worry just about your broken leg or a trip to the hospital, you also need to account for that gun somewhere. And that's just a situation that I would never want to be in. I always have the gun on my person. There is no circumstance where I would ever leave that gun somewhere other than my body for just that reason. Now that brings up the second thing, which is if you're carrying on your body and you have the potential of coming off that bike, where do you want that gun so it doesn't jam into your body and break a rib or a hip or go off in your lap? You need to make sure that you're carrying this in a secure place that can take a bump and not break your body on top of it. It's a hard core piece of metal that you're putting there somewhere on your body, and you do not want to land on this and create further issues. So make sure you're aware. I have rigs from my chest that wrap around kind of like a big neoprene belt. I've got hip holsters, I've got back holsters, I've got all sorts of different stuff for different types of riding so that I can keep this on me when I need to. Now, when it comes to security, there's another item that I think is an often misunderstood item, which is brandishing a weapon. There is no circumstance where you should be pulling a weapon as a deterrent. If you're pulling it as a deterrent, you're already in way over top of your head. The only reason that a weapon is drawn is because you are using it. And that is the point at which we need to actually see that threat become live. That's where you're going from orange into red. Now, anything prior to that, you should either be getting away or finding a de-escalation solution. If you are at that point where you can no longer de-escalate, you can no longer get away, then that weapon is coming out to protect your life or the lives of those around you. There is no other circumstance where you want to bring that out. And that counts whether it's a gun, whether it's a knife, whether it's a screwdriver, anything along those lines. When the fight is on, the last thing you want to be is in a defensive posture. As soon as that fight's on, you immediately go into the aggressive posture and make sure that you are coming out on top. Now, when it comes to the choice of whether or not to carry, obviously a gun is an option here in the States, but so is a knife if you want to go that route. So is a screwdriver, so is a tire iron. Anything you have around you, your helmet could be a weapon if you need it to be. Just recognize that when the time comes where you need to protect yourself, anything that you can get your hands on is better than just your open fists. But even in that circumstance, go at it with aggression. If you are in that situation where you need to fight, make sure that you're fighting with everything you've got. So again, in conclusion, understand the most important thing that you can bring to any of your travel to keep you safer is your own mind, is your awareness, is keeping your head up and paying attention to what's going on around you. 99.9% of your issues can be met and de-escalated or mitigated if you just keep your mind open and your eyes up. That will take care of everything. If you do get caught in that circumstance where you're the 0.1%, make sure that you know what you're doing. Make sure that you have everything available to you and that you're able to utilize anything that's there. As long as you have stepped up properly with your awareness, when you get into red, you will have your sidearm, you will have your weapon, you will have your fists, you will have your stance, you will have your capability to put yourself in that engagement in the best circumstance possible. This is Chad with Be Gone for Good. If you have any questions for me, I know that I went through a lot of this pretty quickly and there's a lot of things I couldn't cover or didn't cover. Maybe there'll be a second video coming. Leave a comment down below if there's anything specifically you want to know. Thank you very much for watching. This has been security on and off the bike for Be Gone for Good. If you like this type of content, want to see more of it, definitely subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so you get notifications anytime we update. Hit that thumbs up, let me know if you like this video so that I can do more along these lines if this is what you're interested in. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.